Hello, this is David with entry number 637. About. I'm here kind of walking on in this I don't know if I would call it quieter, but relatively benign area of Hongdae. Doesn't get very loud, which is good at night. Even when you get 2 o'clock in the morning, it's still relatively civil, I would say. I just came out of a 9:40 showing of The Martian, and I would have to say that overall I'm very happy with what I saw. I was a big fan of the book that I first heard about from a podcast, and the book is also called The Martian, and features is basically about the struggle of a man who I just saw something right there. And take a quick aside. There's this Japanese product that they use in their Chinese food called wei pa, and it's basically like a soup base, like a kind of paste, and they use it almost in every Chinese food they make. And I just saw a can of it over there, and I've never seen it before in Korea, and so I got kind of sidetracked. Basically, the film followed the book very closely, and I think it made some, what would you call them, some adaptations or whatever to the narrative that I think kind of had to be made because of the film's limitations. The book goes into a little bit of minutia and almost bureaucracy when they need help from China's NASA, and in the film they didn't even go into any of that because, like, you think about space travel, and primarily it's U.S. Based. NASA is kind of, at this point in time, end all be all in terms of the authority of how to travel in space technology, that kind of stuff. And we kind of are negligent, they kind of mentioned this in the movie briefly, but we're negligent of China because, unlike the US, which I'm sure they have their secrets as well, NASA, but the Chinese government funded space administration, or whatever they call it, is extremely guarded, and so we don't really know anything about really what kind of capabilities they have, other than they do a lot of research into space travel as well. And in the book, they actually end up having to kind of trade a seat on the next mission that was already, obviously scheduled for someone, an astronaut, an American astronaut, and they have to give that seat up to a Chinese person because they lost their whole program that they were going to send to space. And in order to send supplies with the rescue mission, so they didn't really go into any of that, and it was like a pretty, not pivotal, but it was kind of a big deal in the book that there was this kind of sacrifice or kind of like argument or discussion that had to come to a conclusion in order to get the mission funded, or I don't know what you say, funded or able to do it. That's bad English. Basically, though, the movie's very good. I think the effects were all pretty good. There were a few times that I was actually kind of taken out of the movie because I noticed that it was a little bit wobbly, I'll call it. But on the whole, it was a pretty good movie. I want to take another aside to talk about Ridley Scott, who was the director of the film. I think the last 4 or 5 films that he's directed have been terrible. Not terrible per se, but actually just okay, like average films. And the problem when you have someone who is capable of making movies like Gladiator and Alien, the problem is that when he makes average films, they immediately get judged as terrible. because they are not as good as Alien or Gladiator. And it's something that a lot of people who peak relatively early have to deal with, is that you make this kind of like opus quality film, and how are you going to follow that up with just an average film? Sophomore effort is something that is a critical hinge in a lot of successful people's careers, whether it be music, film, television, producing, directing, writing, doesn't really matter. And Ridley Scott was on kind of the bad end of a long series of kind of mediocre films like Prometheus, and he did, I think, like a Noah's Ark movie, that was Aronofsky. He did a Moses movie about Exodus, and so he had a long series of these kind of mediocre to bad films, and finally, I think with The Martian, he's back on track to kind of making what I would consider great film. I think the big the big kind of question mark, or rather unknown factor at this point, is the fact that he has a few movies lined up, obviously for the next upcoming years, and they all sound like stinkers. And so that's really going to be a problem if he wants to maintain a kind of inertia of good filmmaking. But we'll see. You never know with these guys. Sometimes they have it in them. They can just pull it out of their proverbial asses. But generally, 9 times out of 10, writing's on the wall for a lot of these movies. But on the whole, I would say, going back to The Martian, good film, highly recommended. I know it's already been in the States for like 3 weeks, but Korea just got it last week, so it was very good. Yeah, very good. So that's all I wanted to say today. I might make another video tomorrow because there's something else I want to talk about, but it's completely unrelated, and I don't want to spend another 5 to 10 minutes talking about it here. So we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.